specifically chosen you to be here at this time and in this place. You have incredible potential, purpose, and calling to push back the darkness and be a light for Christ. Stand for nothing and you'll fall for anything. It's time to stand your ground. This is Unapologetic. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Unapologetic. Today, I'm sitting down with husband and wife ministry team Levi and Jennie Lusko. You may have heard of them from their popular podcast, Hey, It's the Luskos, through Fresh Life Church, or one of their many best-selling books. We are talking about marriage. We're talking about purity culture. We're talking about how to read the Bible together, how to fight fair, and ultimately how to have a fulfilling lifelong relationship with one another. I am so excited for you to hear today's conversation. Help me welcome Jennie and Levi Lusko. Hi, y'all.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. What a joy to be here with you today.
So we were talking, y'all are in Montana and we're in Texas, and how often does it snow in Montana? It's foreign to me.
Yeah, we have two seasons. We have summer and then snow.
Oh, wow.
Those are the two seasons.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, I threw a snowball at Jennie this morning.
Inside.
We don't have snow. So like we go in order from Bahama Bucks. We like have them make us snowballs so the kids can have snowball fights, try to have all four seasons. But anyway, let's start out. I'm going to ask you what we ask all guests. What do you wish Christians would stop apologizing for?
Wow, I want to know what you say.
Well, on a frivolous note, I would say stop apologizing if you bought something at the store and you didn't get it on sale. Because it's so annoying when Christians, hey, that's a nice sweater. Oh, don't worry about it. It was on sale. It's like, if it wasn't, does that make you the Antichrist? Like, you could just say
That's
thank
funny.
you. That would be my frivolous one. More serious, I would say just your faith in general. When you look at what followers of Jesus have done over the years of history, we wouldn't have hospitals without Christian faith. We wouldn't have, most of the Ivy League colleges in the country were started to be training centers for pastors and leaders. How different the world would be without Christianity. So don't apologize for your faith. It is literally, don't let the rhetoric fool you. It has changed the world in positive ways, in more ways for women's rights, for minorities than you could possibly imagine.
Wow.
That's great.
So good.
Jennie, what
I'm
would
just
you
going to
say?
go with his answer because that was very well
You're like,
done.
ditto,
I was going to say
we're
faith too,
one.
but he said it way better. I know. I'll just go under the first one that he said.
I think I've just found a lot of people, especially millennials and Gen Z, aren't really aware of Christian impact on culture and on the world. Like they're not, a lot of people don't know what you just said, that Christians are who created hospitals and where most of the universities come from, most of the nonprofits, like the Red Cross. I saw a write-up about the Red Cross, and it left out everything spiritual, all of the origins. And I mean, it just leaves it out. So it's, that's not what we're talking about today, but
the Salvation Army, Boys and Girls Clubs.
Right.
I mean, almost all of these things were started with people who have the compassion of Christians. William Wilberforce, the anti-slaving coalition that he started in a movement in England. Almost all, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a pastor. So many of the great things we take for granted were started with people who had the conviction that followers of Jesus should be loving.
Wow.
This is history class. History class on the Unapologetic.
I know. We
Show
should
with
just
Levi
talk
Lusko.
about this, but I'm not prepared for it. Maybe we'll do that sometime. I am really excited for what we're talking about. So whenever I found out about your marriage devotional, I had this flashback of Ryan and me because we've been married for 14 years. And you start out marriage and you're like, I know what we're supposed to do. Like you just finished hopefully premarital counseling and you're supposed to read your Bible together. And so we tried to do devotionals together. And we always fought, like always. It always started some horrible arguments. So like we were okay. I can't wait to talk to you all about this. So this is the first thing I thought of whenever I saw your devotional come out. We were fine doing our quiet time separately. We're fine like discussing the sermon afterwards and kind of like uniting our faith that way. But once we really started doing devotionals together, I mean, truthfully, because I guess it brought up so much, it would always result in an argument. And so is that just us, or can y'all kind of speak to that? What happens when couples start doing devotionals together?
Well, let me
Yeah.
say
Y'all are gonna
this.
be like, it's
That
just
is so
you.
real. No. I think we want that to be real. And that's one of the reasons why we started our devotional the way we did, by telling the story of a knock 'em out, drag 'em out fight that we had, because we wanted everyone reading it to go, okay, we're talking as real people. There's zero halos. This is not a stained glass devotional.
No.
We had a fight this morning. So we want, that's good though. But, and I think one of the things we want people to see is conflict is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's the occasion for us to grow more close to Jesus.
Wow.
Really, iron sharpens iron is a nice verse to put on the wall in your house, but iron sharpening iron means you're taking scraping and rubbing things away till sparks
Metal.
fly.
Wow.
So, but that's how we get better. So the conflict that it's bringing that out is giving us the chance to forgive, the chance to humble ourselves, the chance to suck it up and say I was wrong.
To grow.
What's the Dietrich Bonhoeffer quote? He said that church is a place of broken dreams, and that's a good thing. Meaning only when we have our expectations unmet do we get to actually reenact the gospel. So you're in normal company.
Yeah.
We're talking to the right people here, because it's real.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, and we've found that when we are like having our own quiet times, we're studying, like we're actually reading through the Bible together, but separately. So we're both reading through the Bible, the exact same reading plan, but we're reading it separately. And then it gives us things like, oh my gosh, did you see that when Jesus was at the table with Zacchaeus? Oh my gosh, this was crazy. Like it just gives us, but I think that even points back to the most important thing in a marriage is your individual relationship with Jesus, because you can't expect your husband, your spouse to meet those needs, to be what only Jesus can. So when you're like spending time with Jesus on your own, when you're receiving from him only what he can give to you, his power, his love, his grace, his strength, his spirit, then you come together in marriage and you get to enjoy each other. You're not expecting so much from them because you can just enjoy, because you've been filled with Jesus. And so I feel like that is helpful. And I think some couples do read devotionals together, which is awesome. I don't know if we actually ever have.
Yeah, we think one way people are going to love to use this is to have read it alone, but then using the conversation starters that exist at the end of every entry to come together on their date night or whatever and actually compare notes on what they were learning. But of course, the couple that wants to sit down and have one milkshake with two straws and read the book together, that's cute too.
Yes. So, I told y'all before we started, we went from 0 to 3, like became parents to a lot of kids out of nowhere. And everything was so busy. I'm just thinking about sharing this for our listeners, because a lot of families are so busy. They're like, how are you going to work and get the kids to school and have devotional time, milkshake with 2 straws? Like, that doesn't seem doable for a lot of people. It is, but a lot of people be like, okay, that's not realistic. So I just want to share, like, 14 years later, what we do. We realized we were never going to read any parenting or marriage book if we didn't set a time. And so it's super corny. Like, I can be really corny. And so we call it our Tuesday night book club. But all it means is it's just us, because we're not going to read a book during our daily schedule. And so we know that we have that time where we can, learn something as parents or as Christians together. That's what we do. What do y'all practically do to be able to be learning together?
Yeah, well, I love that. And I love that you put a name to it. And I think what the thing is to find what works for you as a couple, and that's so inspiring. I think that sometimes we can see what other couples do and we're like, oh, we need to do exactly that. We need to do this thing. We need to do this thing, this thing, this thing. But it's like, okay, take that inspiration, take that encouragement, that challenge, and then figure out what actually is the best for you as a couple in your time and your schedule.
And one thing that helps us too is audiobooks. That was one of the reasons it was so important to us to make sure the marriage devotional audiobook was there. Jennie writes some, I write some, and then there's some where it's in our voice together. So when we went to the studio to record, we did it exactly that way. She would be in the booth, I would be in the booth. Then during the chapters it's Levi and Jennie, we were both in there. And I could see couples putting the chapter on the way to their date night.
Yeah.
They could
we could
listen
really
to it in the
stir
car.
up things. No, I'm just kidding.
Ooh, yes. But we do
Listen
love
to the
an
baggage
audiobook.
one right before. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh gosh. Yeah,
Exactly.
maybe not that one.
But, we've loved that. Audiobooks have been for us and even our families. We always pick out an audiobook before a family vacation.
awesome.
And it's our kids really look forward to those.
Okay, so I want to ask you about that too, because it's just like me asking your opinion. Like I get to get all this wisdom, and then the listeners get to benefit from it. I have been so touched lately because our kids are starting to really notice us reading the Bible and us praying together. And of course, the Bible says you're not supposed to, of course, pray for other people to see you. Like that's not the goal. But can you just kind of speak to why it's important for your kids to know that you read the Bible and to pray together?
Absolutely. Well, the studies have shown that the number one determining factor in whether a child will grow up and be a reader of books is whether or not they are read to by their parents. And whether they see their parents reading or not. So if you're a parent and you just sit down and read a book every once in a while, your kids are going to walk in the room and see you doing that. They already have a leg up of doing that themselves because kids hear what you say but do what you do, and more is caught than taught. So, and the second factor, of course, that you read to your kids. So your kids having the same is true, of course, with your quiet time. If they see you praying, if they see you, doing those things, much more is being absorbed than you even realize. Okay,
I want to move into some specific things that y'all address because there are a lot of marriage devotionals out there. And I think, personally, what I think a strength of yours is, of course, is that you both wrote it together. You're both in ministry, you're both parents. And then I really appreciated just personally that you were very real and theological because sometimes I'm a therapist by trade. So some of the resources, they're either extremely theological where it's like, okay, practically how do I implement anything that I just read about?
Yes, how do I live this out?
Or it's almost too real where it's all about struggles and not really about victory. And so I really appreciated just how much y'all talk about forgiveness and baggage and how to move forward. So I want to ask you a few questions about that. I have found a lot of people are confused, especially like the first 10 years of marriage. They're confused that they don't enjoy every season. Like every season isn't wonderful. And I remember learning as a therapist that it's when you have little kids is most stressful. So it's usually like the 5 to 10 year period. And then if you stick it out to that 10 years, you slowly start getting back into a happier time. But I found a lot of people don't expect there to be bad seasons. If we're Christians, if we love each other, then why, seasons can go on for a long time. It can be years of not really being where you want to be. So can you kind of speak to what to do with disappointment or when you're not really where you want to be as a couple, how to stick it out?
Well, it's interesting because, everything is so huge these days. So, weddings, you see them on Instagram and TikTok and everything. And it's like, oh my gosh, this wedding.
I'm so glad I wasn't married during TikTok or Instagram. It's like a little thing that I literally have thanked God for. Thank you.
Honestly.
Well, and someone just bragged to us I just went to a wedding. The budget must have been $500,000. And I was just like, that's what a bummer.
I have a secret prayer that all this goes away before our kids are teenagers. I'm like, please help social media. Just
the pendulum will probably swing the other way. Yeah. But even with engagement photos, all these things that are just so big and huge. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. And this is wonderful. And then it's but we don't necessarily see the hard stuff. And so I think that maybe in our minds, we think, oh, well, everything just has to be incredible and awesome and wonderful and powerful and legit and epic. And it's but that's not life. There are seasons where that is, and we should celebrate it. We should enjoy it and have fun. But then there's also the valleys and the hard times and the diagnosis and the death in the family and the struggles. And I think that if we can just be aware that that is life, that there's ebbs and flows, there's the valley of the shadow of death. In Psalm 23, you see all different seasons. You see being by still waters and the green grass and the valley of the shadow of death and the banqueting table. And it's that's life. And just knowing that ebbs and flows. And And also, I think being aware that we're going to go through trials and that we can train for the trial that we're not yet in.
Wow.
So the season that you're in actually can be training you for the next season.
Right.
And the valley, the mountain highs can be training you for the valley lows, and the valley lows can be training you for the mountain highs, and all the stages in between.
Yeah. And, postpartum is tough. That just is. And there's lots of seasons that are challenging. And I think we have to find beauty in our own way in winter, when things are dormant, when things are cut back, when there's pruning. And it makes the joys that much more pronounced and profound when you get to them, when you hang on in the harder times. But you do have to have that expectation that it's not all this. And I think we also have to strip away unrealistic expectations for marriage. The honeymoon night, for example. You don't know what you're doing, and that's okay. You have your whole life to become great lovers. And no one learns how to play a Stradivarius violin, which is an illustration we use for sexuality in the book, the first time they touch one. Neither can you expect that you're going to know how to bring that profound joy to your spouse in the marriage bed the first time you approach it. And so I think giving yourself the grace to grow as a lover, giving yourself the grace to grow as a husband. Jennie and I are so much better at sex now, 18 years in than we were, the first year. And we just say it just keeps getting better, richer. It's like wine that is a vintage. It's like no one loves wine that's 2 weeks old. But in every movie, what's celebrated is that newness of intimacy with someone they just met. You couldn't pay me enough money to walk away from what I have here 18 years in. This is a vintage that's well aged, and its bouquet is like pomegranates, as opposed to basically drinking mouthwash, which would be anything else to me. But I think you don't get there over time. I've grieved with this girl. We've wept in intensive care units together. We stood at the casket of a child. And that has brought about an intimacy that is, to me, like the Proverbs 31 woman. If you gave all the money in the world, would you be despised for trading this kind of love for that?
Gosh, Jennie, would you like to say anything? No,
I just think
so encouraging.
It's amazing.
Wow.
But what he brought up about postpartum stuff, I feel like it's kind of the same thing as like, oh, the joy of having a baby, that's amazing. And it is, and it's wonderful, and it's awesome. But there are hard parts about it. And I think that's what's honestly so helpful about not just being in your married relationship and not having other couples that you can like go to and ask questions, and
a good therapist to call
and a
in
good
a pinch.
therapist, because we need yes, it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a village to be in a marriage, in the sense that we need wisdom. We need to be like receiving, what the heck do we do with this? How do we do this? And not being surprised by pain, and not being surprised by the hard stuff and the trial, but knowing that, okay, this actually is hard, and how to prepare for this, and how do we get ready for this? But yeah.
I remember hearing one time someone say they want to learn as many lessons vicariously as possible, like so that they're not having to learn them all firsthand. And I think that's something great about, I mean, I didn't come up with that. So I'm like, I have to give credit to someone. But
you know the rule: if you quote it the first time, you say the person's name. The second time, you say, "As I always say." And then the third time,
no. But that's what I think is so great about your book, is there's so much you can learn vicariously. Like, oh, okay, so that's how you do this, instead of having to learn and figure it out all firsthand. I do want to ask you, because so many people are getting married later in life. That's kind of the generation right now. And the Bible talks about he who finds a wife finds a good thing, and that we're supposed to rejoice in the wife of our youth. And I mean, mine would be husband. But there seems to be a lot about finding your spouse young. And I know I'm very sensitive to the fact that there are a lot of people that wish they had found their spouse young or could find someone, and that's not their story. And so they really have had to try to stay pure whenever, the age that a lot of people are married. Can you just kind of speak to the baggage that people carry into marriage, and how to process that and forgive and realize that God has restored and created something new?
Yeah, well, that's a nuanced conversation, right? I think there's lots of levels I would approach that at. Of course, I think in a perfect world, you're not going, decades and decades if you do intend to get married. And during that time, approaching dating like it's a game, serial dating, kind of looking at it in an instant gratification kind of way. And I think that's one of the things we want to point people to is looking at dating as a quest to find the person you're going to marry, and not a chance to just sow your wild oats, which is how culture kind of looks at it, and then you have Tinder and porn to satisfy your needs until that time. And I think that's going to accumulate a lot of baggage down the road, because the Bible is clear: a man sows and then he reaps, and you reap exactly what you sow. So you don't sow watermelons and reap apples. You don't sow sin and then reap life. You don't sow sexual promiscuity and misusing this gift of intimacy God gave to us, but then all of a sudden turn 30, put a ring on your finger, and expect that to not be there. You're going to be who you became over time through those series of choices.
Wow.
And sex is like a Post-it note. Every time you stick it, it loses a little of its stickiness. So you can't bind yourself to a person and then another person, but then one day get married and not have done that. The two become one, and there's no way to unone them. Now, that being said, if you are in marriage and you do say, hey, look, I do have baggage and I did make some of those mistakes and I wish I hadn't, that doesn't mean that God can't work. And, God can make all things new if you repent, if you ask him to, restore the years the locusts have eaten. So I would say to both people, be careful if you're hardening your heart thinking I can just sin, but then say sorry one day. That's not how it works. But then to the person who is saying, gosh, I woke up today with full of remorse, then bring it to God and watch him make the scarlet sins white like snow.
Well, I grew up in what now is being criticized for purity culture. So I guess there were some bad things, but the opposite is acting like there's no effect, and that it doesn't affect marriage, and that it doesn't hurt you to not obey God's laws for sex. And so I just see a lot of Christians throwing out baby with the bathwater, and really,
well, I'm going to add it to my list of things to not be apologetic about. There's a lot worse things in this world than purity culture. All right. And it's called sin culture, and it's called consequence culture, and it's called heartbreak culture, so now, does that mean we need to, be, unloving in the way we communicate about it? Of course not. But that doesn't, I don't want, Ezekiel is this profound story about, son of man, I've set you on a watchtower. And if you don't warn people and then they come to you and say, why didn't you warn me? That God's going to hold you accountable. So we do have the obligation to point people to God's standard and God's best,
Well, when I was young, I was 10, and my mom took me to this purity conference, and I didn't know anything. I was very naive. I still am naive in a lot of things, but what was communicated to me that I actually received and saw the vision for was that sex was a gift from God, and that it was something to be saved up for your future spouse, your future husband. And so I was like, that's what I want. I want to save that up. And I didn't know exactly what that meant. I didn't really know exactly what sex was, but I was like, I want to save that. And so for us, Levi and I both saved the gift of sex for marriage. And that was beautiful. And it continues to be such a gift that we've only been with each other. But I think even in that, there's still learning and growing and figuring things out, and baggage that you bring in that may not be baggage that you slept with someone else, but it might be that you gave your heart to someone else, or the perspective
or
that you
father
have.
wound or
father
any of
wound,
those things.
yeah, any of those things. It's not just the baggage that you bring into marriage is complex and complicated and has many forms. And so I think that just being aware, okay, so you're a couple that saved sex for marriage. That's awesome. But that doesn't mean that it's all going to be perfect before you.
Mm-hmm.
It just means that there's going to be other things that you need to be aware of that God has
and
for you
any
to grow
baggage
in.
you bring into the light loses its power. Brene Brown likes to say that shame needs secrecy, silence, and judgment to thrive. And so when I'm open, and one of the reasons we have in the chapter on baggage, the question of what is our baggage, we can name it to each other. we can bring it into the light, bring it into God's presence, and then it loses its power because it's named. And then it, ironically, like jujitsu, can actually become something that works for you and not against you. And God will begin to use where you were at your weakest to shine His light the brightest.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, in fairness, some of the criticism with the purity culture was that there was not a lot of hope offered if you did mess up. I mean, just stereotypically, it was, you're just going to have a subpar life, subpar ministry, subpar marriage because of this decision.
And you have a scarlet A on your chest. No. We don't want to put a scarlet A on people, or, and we can't obsessively make virginity the only thing, because Pretty Woman taught us you can lose your virginity without even kissing. Right. I mean, so, you can't just make it all about that one thing and then you're damaged goods if you've fallen. Right.
Mm-hmm. That's so good.
Well, and I think that's our job, to, like Levi was saying, to present the truth, but with such grace, because everyone's been in a different circumstances. Everyone has their issues, the things that they've done, the things that have been done to them. And if we can't teach and show and lead the way with grace, then what are we even doing? So having that message of, hey, this is God's best for you. Like this is His gift for you. This is beautiful. But also there's hope for you if you've messed up. And so it's never too late to repent and to move forward and to start making wise choices and living the life that God's called you to live. Like when there's just a vision for your life, I think that that's what our generation really needs, is just vision for what God has for us.
Well, and so I want to talk about that a little bit because, vision is so important. We talked about that earlier, like the different seasons, like just knowing, like it's not always going to be good. It's not always going to be fun. But the great thing about seasons is they change, right? Anything we're dealing with, it's not going to be forever. Like all of a sudden, God can change our circumstances like that, which is amazing. But I want to talk for a second because I'm not sure that a lot of people, we're talking about different baggage that people carry. Some people really are freaked out when they start fighting as a couple. I wasn't freaked out because my family's pretty like up front, but just for an example, like Ryan's like the peacekeeper, peaceful. He was like, oh my gosh. Like he would ask why our family was always arguing. We were just talking. Like that's just how we talk. So I was like, we're not mad at each other. He was like, oh my goodness. We're just like very confrontational and kind of loud. But can y'all just talk for a second, because I was reading this morning Ephesians that talks about how our struggle is not against flesh and blood. Like we are not fighting each other. Ultimately, we have an enemy. There is Satan, and he wants to destroy marriages. So we're not fighting each other. We need to fight for each other. Can y'all just give some special insight into how we can fight fair and make sure we keep the enemy and not our spouse?
Yeah, I think one of the big things to have in our heads, and I think it is very interesting how much this is informed by family of origin, and that does really make a mark. And that's one of the, hopefully, exercises that will emerge. What are your go-to fighting styles? Jennie more is a stuff it all down and then explode, or I'm more, I want to have this out and then we can be done and move on. And I think that's not right or wrong. That's just how we were raised. That's how we were, her parents never really had hard conversations with them. And so I think when we figure out what our fighting styles are, and then we can kind of meet in the common ground, we also should have in the back of our heads, the goal isn't to be right. The goal is the relationship to get right. So I'm not trying to like prove my point and just win this battle. If my goal is, hey, I want our relationship to be healthy. We're one flesh. So the better you're doing is the better I'm doing. So I don't just want to win and get you to say, you were right. I technically did remember you said that. The goal is for us to move forward.
Yeah. And like you brought up, it's so easy when you're in a fight with anyone, and think that that's where the fight is and that's where the conflict is. And yes, there's conflict. And yes, we do need to deal with conflict and come to conclusions and be vulnerable and walk through things, talk through things. But the battle isn't against each other. It's things that we can't see. It's powers that we can't see. It's darkness. And so I think I think Levi had mentioned, like, to be unified is one of the biggest things in marriage, and having that united heart and relationship, knowing that it's not you against each other, but it's you against the world, and not against the world necessarily, but forward and fighting for your relationship, fighting for each other, fighting to build each other up, fighting for honor. I think sometimes we fight in the wrong ways when we should be fighting for each other.
Yeah. So I'm interested in your take on this, because our generation is very into, of course, which there's some, of course, value to, but this is my trauma. This is how I feel. These are my triggers. And like, as a therapist, it's, wow, like, this is great. We're all talking about it. I do realize half the time people really aren't using the terminology correctly. There's value in that. But at the same time, it doesn't change the fact that we're supposed to stay together, that we're supposed to honor God, that we're still supposed to love people. And I mean, it doesn't change the biblical commands, really, no matter what we've gone through. So I know this is like kind of a big topic, but I just want to hear like your take on what is the balance of course, processing and being authentic and all those things that really are very important, but at the same time, making sure we're following the biblical commands in relationships.
Yeah, our friend Lisa Turkers likes to say, "Hey, look, we're all for authenticity. Just make sure you're being authentic to your healed, saved, sanctified, spirit-filled self, and not who you were before Christ." So my truth isn't, well, that's just how I feel. That's just a cop out for the flesh that it wants to get its way and gratify itself. Be authentic, but just be authentic to who the Holy Spirit has made you capable of becoming after the death of Jesus on the cross. I think that's different than just me wanting to get my own way by being like, well, this is how I feel, And so I think we do have to remember, love at the end of the day is not a feeling, it's a choice. So I can't walk away because I don't feel love for Jennie. It's like, well, then continue to choose love and you'll feel oftentimes on the back end. I do think what you said is true. I think it's good that our culture is digging up some of these things. And for a long time, the church was oblivious to emotional health and mental health to some regards as well. So it's good that we're having some of these conversations, but we just can't have them at the same level the world does, because we have the Holy Spirit and the resurrection and citizenship in a different kingdom.
Right. Well, and I think it's easy to hide behind those things. So it's like, oh, well, this is my trigger, or this is what I grew up with. So don't bump my bubble. Don't mess with it, because this is what I'm, or even like, well, I have ADHD and I have this and I have this. So I think those kind of things can be like guards or like excuses. But I think all these things that we find out about ourselves, the trigger, the issues, the things that we feel when someone is coming at us in a confrontational way, it's like those are things that God wants to heal. So if we can notice those things and say, okay, this is actually how I feel when this happens. God, I need you to bring this up to the surface and heal it, because I don't want to push this down. I don't want to make an excuse of this. I don't want to tell my spouse, well, you can't tell me this because this is how this makes me feel.
Right.
It's like, no, I want to be, like Levi said, that is so good. I want to be healed and I want to be whole.
Let that be the beginning of the conversation, but not the end. And where it has to end is deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow Jesus. So I think it's the world's having a good conversation. It's just not enough, and it's not where
You're
we
right.
end.
It's not enough. That's such a good point. We used to say once people would kind of receive a diagnosis or gain some insight into what we talked about earlier, like father wound, they'd be like, oh no, I have this like massive father wound, or they have this big trauma from childhood. It was always so reassuring to hear, okay, so that's an explanation. Like you're diagnosed, your struggle, that's an explanation, but it's not an excuse. Like now you know where it started, and now we can get better and we can move forward. There's so much that I could talk to y'all about, but we can't end the show without me asking, what in the world is Rogaine for your marriage? What is that? Well, I didn't get to that part in the book.
Yes, no, that's great. It's very good. Well, it's called male pattern baldness. It affects a disproportionate number of men. Judges 6:22 says that before long, Samson's hair began to grow again. And the hair was, of course, symbolic of his spiritual power. And we really want to encourage marriages and couples. We believe just with all our hearts that even if there's been pain and brokenness, and I know we're talking to some people who are like, man, I've already talked to a lawyer. We're already ready to be done. Or you're quiet quitting. Maybe you're going to stay in the marriage, but just give up on it from the inside. We want to say there can be new growth. There can be, it's not going to be dreadlocks right away. It might just be stubble, but your hair can grow. God does have Rogaine in his closet. He can put that on it. And if you trust him, like Samson, you can find new power, new strength, and it can actually become something that's beautiful.
Well, and it takes time. And I think in an age where we just want it quick, we don't want to work for it. We don't want to wait for the results. We want to plant a seed, but see it like in full bloom and fully grown the next day. When your marriage is like on the brink or you're on the rocks or whatever, it's like, it's not going to the next day be luscious and full of a big jungle of love. It's going to take time. It's going to take time. And so just being patient with that and realize and giving it to God, because like we were talking about the huge wedding and the huge thing that's awesome. It's like, it's not always going to feel that way. And as you're beginning to rebuild something and as you're beginning to really pray and ask God to change your heart and ask God to revive your marriage, it's not going to be quick. It's going to be slow, but the result, like I just think of so many marriages, even within our church, people that we've known that were hurting and really struggling in their marriage. And now years later, there's a vibrancy, there's a beauty, there's a strength. So just sticking with it, just staying close. I mean, I can't think of anything else but John 15:5, where Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If apart from me, you can do nothing. There's fruit only with Jesus. So if we just stick close to Jesus, anything can be done, and nothing can actually be done if we're not abiding in him and with him. So if we're just focusing on Jesus, focusing on the work that it takes in our marriage, there can be beauty and strength and power, like Levi said.
Thank you all for writing this book. I know it's going to help so many people. Can y'all, unfortunately, we're coming to the end. Could talk to y'all for another 30 minutes, but can y'all let our listeners know how to connect with y'all, how to connect with your ministry, where to find your new devotional?
Yep. So we have a website, themarriagedevo.com. That's all things book and audio book and all that. And then we do a podcast called Hey, It's the Luskos. You can hear on Spotify, Apple Music, Access More. And then you could most Thursday nights find us at our favorite Mexican restaurant eating tacos.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being on. So encouraging. Wonderful to talk to you. Thank you for tuning in to Unapologetic. Remember that you can hear today's episode and more at ptv.org/Julia and wherever you get your podcasts.